I have to admit, I'm a little envious of your story, Jose. That was really powerful. And this sort of, we know how faith is transmitted through family, our birth families, our chosen families. But something I've sort of wrestled with in my own story is what happens when you grow up in a non-religious family or a family where faith just isn't really a priority? What if you grew up in a family of nuns or duns? Nuns, those nuns, not these nuns. I think for me, what has been so central to my own story, growing up in a family which was not particularly grounded in religious tradition, was that people who I have encountered in the church, in the world, have shared their stories with me. I know my story because they have shared theirs. They have shared the way that God is working through them and working through their story, and the way that they're working in God's story. And by being able to walk alongside these teachers and to engage in these amazing intergenerational relationships, I have found my own story in God. So in this tradition of telling stories as we know our stories and live them boldly, I want to tell you a little bit about my story and my background. I am so excited to be back in New Jersey. I am born and raised New Providence. Any New Providence, St. Andrews folks here? Oh, that's disappointing. So I was born and raised in New Providence, New Jersey, and went to church a little bit later in life across the border in the other diocese. I won't tell Bishop Beckwith you said that. So I grew up in New Providence in the house that my dad grew up in before me. We had the same childhood bedroom, which was reserved for the oldest child, so very much rooted in this community. And we grew up down the street from my parents' churches, the Catholic church where my father was raised and the Episcopal church where my mother was raised, and we never went. My younger sisters and I weren't really sure about this whole faith thing. My parents wanted us to come to our own decisions about faith, but I didn't actually know what any of that meant. What I did know was that for as long as I could remember, I had this sense of what, at the time, the only language I had for it was a large friendliness, which was the way I experienced God. And it wasn't until I met my first mentor that I had language for it. So in our tradition, we have our beloved community of saints. And my first mentor, bear with me, was St. Joan of Arc. So I grew up in this non-religious family, and I had this sense of this friendly largeness, and I really had no idea what to do with that. It was sort of something where I'd wander in the woods, and I'd sort of have this relationship with the unknown, this mysterious, wonderful unknown. And it wasn't until at the New Providence Public Library I found a book about, a picture book about the life of Joan of Arc, that I encountered this thing called church, where people gathered together and shared their stories. And for me, as a little girl, Joan of Arc was such a mentor in bringing me to church. After I read this book, I was like, okay, I need to find other people who do this. That's the first step, which is how I wound up at Calvary and Summit. She taught me to be bold in my faith. I used to play in the backyard and fight imaginary English armies. It's amazing. I became an Anglican. But what my parents knew was that my father was Roman Catholic, my mother was Episcopalian, the Episcopal Church had more opportunities for young girls. So my parents dropped me off at church, and St. Joan kind of kept me there. My second mentor was my godmother, and is my godmother, Mary. And she has this amazing, quiet presence. She was the director of Christian formation, and she was the first person who I ever encountered who really believed in the gifts of young people. She kept me in prayer all the time. I'd never really encountered what it meant to be prayed for before. And as a teenager, when I fell away from church, she kept praying for me. She loved me even when I wasn't present. And how radical is that? In college, I had two amazing mentors, Paula McKenzie and Lee Palmer-Wandel. Paula was the director of chaplaincy at St. Mary's Hospital. I went into college as a soil science major. That didn't work out. But I was really wrestling with what is it to tell our stories? And Paula has this amazing gift of asking open questions. And in sort of the historical realm, Lee Palmer-Wandel was a professor, and she advised my senior thesis. And it was a really amazing experience in that. So I'm writing this thesis on, get ready, it's very exciting, English medieval hospitals and the doctrine of purgatory. And I was so angry at these medieval patrons who basically would pay for folks to have space in the hospital in exchange for those people's prayers so that they would spend less time in purgatory. And I was so furious at the system, which felt like exploitation. And after reading the first draft of my thesis, Lee just handed it back and said simply, "Can you imagine what it's like to be so afraid that you would pay little boys to sing? That you would pay people to pray for your soul?" And that sense of compassion within academia grounded me in a way moving forward that I think will always stick with me. Our mentors shape who we are. We are all beneficiaries of stories passed down from generation to generation. And this isn't just my story, but this is our story. So I would love to actually have some space for you to tell yours. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go around and hear everybody's, but I'd love to have you turn to your neighbor and just talk about someone who's been a mentor to you, and what was it about them that made you feel especially heard? So let's take a few minutes and do that, and afterwards we'll hear maybe 5 voices. I would love to hear maybe 5 voices. Who was one of your mentors, and what about them made them a great mentor? We've got someone up front.
Hello. I want to do mine because my mentor's here. My name's Amy Cornell, and I'm the rector over at Grace St. Paul's in Mercerville. And when I was about 10 years old, I had started to realize that I wanted to be a priest, but I was a girl, so that wasn't going to happen. Mm-hmm. But it was something that was always germinating in the back of my mind. And when I was about 15 years old, we had seminarians that would come to our church, and we had one that was there for 2 years. And he and his wife at the time would come to the house for dinner and talk to us about what was going on at seminary and what it was like. And the thing that always stood out with me, with him in particular, was I would hear all the horror stories, all the difficulties, all the challenges, and yet he was still driven to do this ministry. And that stuck with me through all of my arguments with God about how I'm not going to do this, how he went ahead and changed the whole ordination thing so that it didn't matter that I was a girl. And in my senior year at seminary, I had an opportunity to come back and spend my field placement with my mentor, Jack Zamboni, and realize that what he taught me without even realizing it as a young person was that with God's grace and guidance, I could do anything that I set my mind to. And I was more than capable of going into this ministry, and that no matter what happened in my life from then on, I would always have Jack at my back. So that's why I wanted to tell my story, was to share that with you.
So your mentor believed in you. Your mentor was a model for you. Other voices, mentors.
Hi, my name, was that me? My name is Peggy McGinn, and what came to mind was, I was just around 30, and I had a series of losses in my life, and I went to a spiritual center, a Catholic center. I was Catholic, born and raised, and you know, I expected to see a priest, and instead, a woman came in who had a collar on, and she introduced herself. I'm Betty Berlenbach, and I'm a deacon, and she must have, my face must have showed something, and she said, yeah, I'm the black sheep. I'm an Episcopalian among all the Catholics. So I didn't kind of quite get that, but we had an extraordinary time together. And there was one time I was meeting with her at her church, and she was studying to be a priest at that time. And you know, I was grieving this loss, and she stood up and she grabbed my hand and she said, "Come with me," and she kind of dragged me into the church. And what I had said to her was, the loss made me feel like I was shattered glass. And so she's pulling me into the church. I had no idea what she was doing. And then she pointed to a large stained glass window, and she said, "This is what God does with broken glass." And it was the first time I ever viewed God in something different than how I had ever seen God before. And then I went back to the Catholic Church and went about my life. And about 6 years ago, I did go back. I walked through the doors of an Episcopal church in Asbury Park, and mainly because they had chalk all over the sidewalk telling me I was welcome. And when I walked through those doors, I thought of Betty, and because of what I found. And although our time wasn't long together, it made such a remarkable difference in my life in difficult times and such. To look and say, God doesn't have to be what I just thought was two-dimensional, but could be so much more. So, thank you.
My name is Sam Wilson. I'm here with my wife from Church of the Advent in Cape May, and we're happy to be here. My story begins on October the 31st, Halloween night, a moonless night, in 1972, when I was about to make a parachute jump with my colleagues on a Special Forces training exercise over a soybean field somewhere in central North Carolina. I had a bad exit. I had been lying around with my chute on for several hours, and I was cramped and weak. And when I exited the airplane, my exit was a weak one. And as a result, my shrouds were twisted. I was falling like a rock. I couldn't pick up the horizon. And I did the thing they had trained me to do, which was to bicycle my legs to develop a counter twist to open up the chute. And unfortunately, instead of having my feet and knees together like it's supposed to when I land, I was bicycling. And so I landed on one leg, which shattered. They helicoptered me out to a hospital, wrapped me up, gave me a couple of pieces of aspirin, and said, come back in the morning and we'll see how we can take care of you. True story. So I came back into the clinic in the morning. They tried to set my leg several times. They realized they couldn't without surgery. So they sent me up on the ward, and I had a 24-hour love affair with morphine. Time came for the surgery, and I was going down the hall on the gurney, and out of nowhere, there appeared this very strapped-looking young chaplain major in the 82nd Airborne Division who popped up beside me and walked with me and held my hand going into surgery. And he was there when I came out. And he visited me during my recovery. And my friendship and relationship with him was formed under those circumstances. And shortly thereafter, I began to meet with him in his home, sitting on the living room floor, doing my weekly homework in the old church's teaching series, which was the old 6-volume then. It was a little easier back then. And not many weeks later, I was confirmed in the Episcopal Church of East Carolina, the Diocese of East Carolina, at the Post Chapel there by the bishop. And from then on began a lifelong love affair I've had with my church. A different kind of mentoring, maybe one that had a very abrupt start and end, but one that launched me on a life of faith. His name was M. Johnson Haygood. Haygood is a very famous family name from South Carolina. I don't know where he is now, but I will always be grateful for him being there for me.
Thank you. This is really interesting. So far we've had 3 stories of mentors, and they've all been ordained. And I think ordained folks are okay, but has anyone had any lay people who've been mentors to them? Raise of hands.
My name is Barbara Hewlett. I'm from Lakewood, All Saints, with my church family. And my mentor was my mother.
Mm-hmm.
I hated doing homework. And she would stand over me and say, you can do anything you want to do if you make up your mind to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. I overcame it. I went to church, Sunday school, grew up in All Saints. I was in the child choir. I'm now in the adult choir.
Mm-hmm.
After being a nurse 45 years, she also told me I would be a nurse. And I had to think a little bit about that, and I kind of liked the idea. So I was a nurse for 45 years, wore many different hats. I love my God. He has seen me through everything. He has taught me many, many lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the end of my story.
Thank you. And then Jose is happy to translate in, from Spanish to English if anyone would like to share.
I have one over here.
Hi. En español. Oh, Spanish or?
Or either way, whatever works for
Spanish?
you.
Ok. Mi nombre es Rosa Peña. Yo soy de la iglesia San Andrés en Camden. Sigo. Oh, you want to go to try?
Ella se llama, Spanish, wow. Forgetting what language I'm in. Her name is Rosa Peña, and she is from, what was it?
San Andrés, en Camden.
San Andrés in Camden, St. Andrews.
Yo creo que tengo en San Andrés más de 15 años.
She's been there for more than 15 years.
Y mi mentor fue el padre Pedro Guzmán.
Her mentor is Father Pedro Guzman.
Él vio cosas en mí que yo no sabía que la tenía.
He saw things in her that she didn't know she had.
Yo siempre he sido muy tímida para hablar en público y micrófono, ni se diga, nunca han sido los míos.
She's always been very shy, especially speaking in front of people, and even especially talking with a microphone.
So, había una conferencia de mujer episcopal en Texas y él dijo, Rosa, para que vaya a esa conferencia. Yo dije, está bien, un fin de semana para allá, está bien.
So there was a conference in Texas, and he said, Rosa, I want you to go there to this conference. And she was like, okay, I guess so.
Cuando llego allá, en la conferencia habían que tener como algunas 500 mujeres, tenían talleres para las mujeres. Resulta que el primer taller le tocó a mi grupo dar una charla y yo tuve que hablar delante de ese grupo de mujeres en un círculo, me pusieron para hablar en el medio.
And it was a conference that had about 500 women. And there were many different, what's that word? Talleres, little... Workshops, thank you. Okay. There were many different workshops. And on the first workshop, she was asked to give a presentation in front of everyone.
So, cuando me tocó dar la presentación, antes yo entrar, yo digo, Dios mío, tú sabes que yo no sirvo para esto y no tengo palabra, pero si tú me trajiste aquí, pon palabra en mi boca para poder expresar lo que tengo que decir.
And so when she had to do her presentation, she prayed and she said, my God, you know that I'm not very good at this and I'm very shy, but if you really want me to do this, put the words in my mind and in my mouth.
Yo fui, hice la presentación, todo el mundo dijo que estuvo muy bien porque hablé directamente, miré a la gente a la cara, y que bueno, salí. Yo salí aliviada, yo dije, oh, Dios mío, terminó esto ya. Cuando termino, digo yo, mira, este padre Pedro, es lo que él me metió, sabiendo que yo no puedo con esto, y mira qué tramposo.
And so after the presentation, she was so relieved, and she was like, wow, I can't believe I just did this. And then she thought about it, and she was like, I can't believe that the priest made me do this. He knows that I'm not very good at this, and he's such a trickster.
So, hoy día yo le doy gracias al padre Pedro, porque él me ha motivado mucho. Yo sé que Dios está primero en mi vida y él es que dirige todo mi paso. Pero gracias a él he estado en muchísimos ministerios, muchísimos comités. No me da miedo, aunque tengo mi falla hablando, no me da miedo hablar. Y si tengo que hacer algo entre delante de 500 o 1000 personas, no me hace nada, voy y lo presento. Gracias a que él vio en eso que yo no lo estaba viendo. Y hoy yo le agradezco mucho a él porque puso la confianza de él en mí. Gracias, Padre Pedro.
Amén. Amén. Yeah. And she's very thankful to Father Pedro, who saw this in her, and of course God comes first, and he is the one that strengthens us and inspires us, but Father Pedro saw things in her that she didn't even see in herself, and now she's been asked to lead in different committees and in different groups, and if she has to talk in front of 500 people or 1,000 people, she knows that she can do that because of Father Pedro's faith in her. Gracias. Un placer.
So our mentors have believed in us. Our mentors have walked with us. Our mentors have shown us a new way of having faith in God. Our mentors have shown us possibilities for our lives and vocations that we couldn't imagine for ourselves. So mentoring is becoming an increasingly big deal in sort of the social science world. And this is sort of an aggregation of many different definitions of what a mentor is. And it's things that we've already described. A mentor is someone with greater experience or wisdom than the mentee. Second, the mentor offers guidance or instruction that's intended to facilitate the growth and development of the mentee. And third, there's an emotional bond. There's this trust. You can be in conversation with someone, but if you don't trust them, it's going to be really hard to find God in the midst of that. And mentoring is something that doesn't just happen in our sort of social science secular world, but it's grounded in the life of our faith tradition. So this is, if you have your phones, if there's a Bible in your pew, Luke 10:25 through 37, the parable of the Good Samaritan. And to me, this passage really sort of charges us to go and do likewise. How do we learn our faith? It's not just by the written law, it's not just by written text, but it's by telling these stories. It's by following these patterns. We learn our spiritual practices. We're finding more and more, both in church and in the social sciences, by being around other people, by being in relationship with other people who are living this out, who are living out their baptismal covenant. You can read the baptismal covenant again and again in the Book of Common Prayer, but if you don't see people around you practicing it, if you're not in relationship with those people, it's hard to know what that looks like. So spiritual mentoring is an age-old Christian tradition. It's how we went from the disciples to today. And oftentimes I think it's a gift that we say is too rare. You have to be Desmond Tutu. You have to be Bishop Chip Stokes. You have to be ordained. Oh, I couldn't possibly be a mentor for someone because I don't have the training, I haven't been to seminary, I'm just me, I just have my relationship with God. But that's where faith formation happens. It's by telling our stories to each other. We all have something to learn. We all have something to learn, but we also all have something to teach. We're called to be both mentees and mentors, to be in these intergenerational relationships where we pass down our faith. And I am tight on time. How much time do I have? 2 minutes? All right, skipping ahead. So mentoring is not just beneficial for the mentee, for the person who is being mentored. Just out of curiosity, with a raise of hands, who here has acted as a mentor to someone else? The great majority. Who has had a mentor? Amazing. And these just aren't mentors. There's sort of formal mentor relationships where, there's a structure, there's a program. I think our church can learn a great deal from these structured programs, but they're also relationships that occur sort of naturally in our communities. You might have a mentor who you've never gone out to them and said, will you be my mentor? But they've walked with you on your journey. They've formed you in your discipleship. So mentoring, this is from Parker Palmer. It just came out in the On Being column this week, and I thought it was so beautiful. So mentors and apprentices are partners. In an ancient and human dance, one of teaching's great rewards is the daily chance it gives us to get back on the dance floor. It's the dance of spiraling generations in which the old empower the young with their experience, and the young empower the old with new life, reweaving the fabric of the human community as they touch and turn. We all have something to learn. We all have something to teach. It's by walking together, by engaging in these intergenerational relationships. We as the church have such gathered wisdom. And the older members of our congregation have things to teach the younger members, and the younger members have things to teach the older. I think by entering into these relationships in which we walk together, by going and doing likewise, that is one of the main ways we form disciples, where it doesn't matter if you have a family that comes from a faith background or not. By seeking out and by serving as mentors, we grow the church and we grow in faith. Amen.